Welcome everyone to this session, a new model for governance and membership. My name is Noreen Gumbo. I have the great pleasure of opening this session today. I'm currently a board member, deputy chair of the board, and I participated in the discussions on modelling our future governance and membership in June and July this year. This session has been put together by Antigone and Mo. Antigone is the Governance and Membership Manager, and Mo is the Member Engagement Advisor at START Network Secretariat. And it will be moderated by Vincent Hansen, who is the Due Diligence Platform Manager. The purpose of this session is really to look at our move towards a network of networks. There will be changes as a result in how our current network operates. And fundamentally, our governance and membership models. Over the last 18 months, we've learned a lot about the realities of START Evolves, the hub incubation process, how to build sustainability, the governance and due diligence components that are so important. At this assembly, we will be seeking the endorsement of our members and stakeholders on this work done so far, and in particular, the governance design and membership transition. The team gathered many questions as we explored these areas, and there is a questions and answers paper available, but not all questions have been answered. You know, some of these questions can only be answered through further work and through further modelling. We have started this work, but there is still nuances to be worked out. In order to proceed with this modelling, we need members' agreement that the principles and that the phases of transition outlined in the two papers are the right ones, that basically we're in the right direction. At the AGM on Wednesday, members won't be approving the practicalities of the transition itself, but more the framework which we anticipate we will use to continue modelling out the financial, the administrative, the practical, the legal, and the sustainability implications. So lots of detail required. You will be consulted at each step of the way. What we're looking for on Wednesday is broad approval or encouragement that the direction that we've taken is the right one. So we won't be going into the details of those two papers in the session today, but Antigone and Mo are basically here to address members' questions and concerns and to set them up for making those decisions on Wednesday at the Assembly. So I'm going to hand over now to Antigone yeah, enjoy the session.
Thank you, Noreen, and welcome everyone to our session. Just before we dive into the questions and answers, first of all, I wanted to say again, if any of you watching this have questions or comments while we're speaking, feel free to put them in the chat or the moderated Q&A on the platform. But before we start, I wanted to quickly remind everyone of those two key pieces of work that are coming to the members tomorrow for approval. And those are the governance design, which was a piece of work that happened last year between February and September. So it was over several months and involving a group of various stakeholders, including hub representatives, members of the network, and trustees of the START network. And that governance design tried to describe what the governance structure of the network of networks would be. So as the network decentralizes from a central membership organization into essentially a network of hubs, what does this mean for the way we make decisions and where do decisions sit? And that piece of work was approved last year by the board of the START network, by the hub leadership teams, and it was also discussed at the assembly last year, but it was more of a consultation rather than a formal approval. The second piece of transition thinking is the membership transition paper that we put together this year. So between June and October, again, we had a working group that came together, and which was also made up of representatives from our hubs, from our members, and from our board. The resulting paper or framework was also discussed with members in country in a series of workshops in our hub countries in Pakistan, DRC, Guatemala, and the Pacific. And it has also been socialized with the assembly representatives through webinars that we ran the past couple of months. So this is just to give you a sense of the process that we followed to come up with these designs, and the fact that there were many different stakeholders that were involved. It took several months in both cases, and we're very pleased to come to the assembly tomorrow with those two papers. And for those of you that might need a very quick refresher, because I'm aware a lot of our members have engaged with those pieces of work a number of times, so you're potentially quite familiar with them. But just to give everyone a quick overview of what the governance design and the membership transition papers are talking about, I will start with the governance design. Essentially describes a model of governance and a model of the network in which there are several different components that form a confederation. So essentially, there are many different hubs, and each hub has its own decision-making and governance structure, and they come together and are held together through a treaty, through some sort of agreement, and some minimum standards across the confederation. And we modeled that. We modeled that on the Swiss, governance model in Switzerland, and essentially try to look for, what is the most devolved decision-making structure and principle that we can replicate in the network. And that is very much at the heart of the governance design, is that decisions are sitting with hubs as much as possible, and that any decisions that need to be made globally or by the hubs together, this happens through the hub council, which is similar, I guess, to the assembly that we have today. So the assembly of members becomes the assembly of hubs, or the council of hubs. We came up in the governance design with some principles for voting. So how would voting work in the council? If you consider that each hub needs to have a vote, but then also considering the size of a hub, and the idea that if a hub has a greater number of members, then they get an additional vote or a couple of additional votes. We looked at where decisions sit and where different types of decisions, so strategic, financial, conflict resolution, where that all sits across those different components, and with most of them, obviously, as I said, sitting with hubs, but then some of them sitting with the Start Network platform, which enables the hubs and is accountable to them, and others sitting with the Hub Council. And we also outlined the 3 phases of transition. So from where we are now as a network and as a governance model, which is quite centralized, we have, one board of trustees, one assembly, all decisions are made in one place. And how do we transition from where we are now to this future confederation model? And we outlined these 3 phases of transition, which we envision would happen between now and 2025. And that is an indication, that is an indicative date for how we think practically this transition could happen. And I think Mo will talk about these transition phases a bit more, and I will pass it over to her to speak a little bit about the second paper, which is the membership transition.
Thanks, Antigone. And if you can just move to the next slide, great. So as Antigone mentioned, I'm just going to quite quickly take you through the transition phases that she just outlined. I'm sure many of you have kind of seen the following diagram in different guises, which really maps out and outlines the journey that we plan to take as we shift from our kind of current, more centralized model to our kind of final end state, which will comprise of a network of independent entities or hubs, which are then supported by the Global Secretariat. So this slide shows those 3 phases of that journey as was kind of designed by the governance working group. But this one really actually focuses specifically on UR members and actually where what will be happening during those 3 phases. And it's probably important to just reiterate that, as more and more hubs emerge and become independent entities, as was outlined, they will become the vehicle for all of START's activities and programs and membership and strategy in their own kind of national or regional context. And this is very much in accordance with the kind of vision outlined in START Evolve back in 2017, and which was collectively seen as the kind of best way to ensure a more diverse membership and a more kind of locally led decision making. So to illustrate the phases of transition, you can see on the kind of left-hand side, the kind of current START network phase, which is where we are now, where it shows that we have kind of individual organizations, and this is comprised of local, national, or international organizations that are directly members of the START network. Country offices of our INGOs are also members of START through their family membership. And so this is the model that many of you have been used to and are obviously familiar with. So if we move then to the kind of evolving or middle or the second phase, what happens is that the countries or regions where there is a hub, so for instance, in our kind of current 5 founding hubs, once they become independent entities, then those local or national members present in those countries, or the INGO members present in those countries or regions would join the hub directly. So they would sign a hub membership agreement and participate in decision-making programs, etc., through that hub. So they would also be part of the hub governance. So this is what happens obviously in countries or regions with a hub presence, but in those places where there isn't a hub during this kind of phase, everything remains much like it is now. So the family membership dynamic will still remain for those members in countries or regions where there's no hub presence. And then finally, in the kind of end state, which is Antigone mentioned, we envisage being no kind of sooner than 2024, 2025. We've envisaged a kind of fully decentralized network model where there are only hubs and membership is only possible via the hubs. So the kind of global family membership will no longer exist. And it's the hubs themselves that become this kind of START network platform members. So thinking through this transition, and the kind of governance and speaking with stakeholders, including hubs, over the last couple of years or so, we came up with a number of questions around what the practical implications might be for existing members of the START network. And importantly, there were kind of 2 questions in particular that we believed were really critical to be answered at this stage. And indeed, this is what you'll be kind of voting on tomorrow during the AGM. So firstly, and if I can ask, firstly, so for existing members who are eligible to join the hubs, so members based in current hub countries or regions, do they automatically opt into hub membership? Is it a given that there will be a member of the hub, or is there something that needs to happen that will kind of enable existing members to join the hub and commit to the hub's vision? So can the hubs really define their own criteria for membership and have their own autonomy? And then the second critical question was around what happens if a member doesn't join the hub, or they just don't want to join the hub, in a particular kind of country. What does that mean for their access to START's programs and resources in that country? So, following consultations with various stakeholders that Antigone mentioned, including input from our member reps, the kind of following 2 recommendations were proposed to answer these 2 critical questions. So with regards to the first question around the implications of hub autonomy, it was recommended that the opportunity to join the hub will be open to all Start Network, members in that hub country, but it won't be an automatic kind of opt-in, right? So just because an organization is a member of the Start Network presently through their global membership, it doesn't automatically mean that they will become a hub member. So hubs will be able to set their own criteria for an organization to join the hub, which will be specific to each hub, and would likely include something around demonstrating commitment to locally led action. And this will also be in addition to kind of Start Network's own minimum criteria, but also to maintain the kind of minimum required 50-50 balance during this transition of local, national, and kind of international organizations. INGO kind of intake into the hub may be staggered in some hub contexts, but this wouldn't interrupt or have an impact on their access to Start Network resources. So, all right. With regards to the kind of second question around the level of access to Start funds and resources and programs if they don't join the hub, again, the recommendation is that existing members, if an existing member remains outside of the hub, then that member will not have access to the Start or hub programs or resources in that hub country. This would mean they wouldn't be involved in hub decision-making mechanisms, be able to access funding directly or kind of raise alerts. However, in the kind of spirit of inclusivity, it was acknowledged that, you know, if an organization wasn't a member of the hub, there would still be opportunities available to engage and interact and partner in other ways, whether it's through providing technical expertise or even acting being participants as downstream partners in alerts. And lastly, in countries where there are no hubs, global and family membership will remain as is until either a hub is actually formed in that country or region, or when the kind of envisaged end state is reached, so whichever one comes first. So I'm now going to pass you back to Antigone, who will go through some of actually the specific questions and comments that you have raised, both about the governance design and the membership transitions over the last few weeks. So over to you, Antigone.
Thanks, Mo. Yeah, so I think that the next and the bulk really of this session is not to rehash the summary of the governance design and the membership transition. You can actually find, and for any of you listening in now who haven't accessed those papers or haven't seen the governance design of the membership transition, I would just encourage you to go to the Network of Networks Learn Corner on the event platform, because they're both publicly available there. But really, the focus of this next bit of the session is to really get to the bottom of some of the key issues, questions, concerns that have been raised by members over the last few months, over the last few weeks, actually, with regard to the governance design and the membership transition. And just to acknowledge that there has been a lot of feedback from a lot of members, a lot of hubs. We've compiled it, and you can see a screenshot, hopefully here on the slide, of all of the different questions and comments that came through from our members around either the governance transition or the membership transition, and we've answered them, or we've tried to address those questions through a Q&A document, which Noreen mentioned in the beginning as well. But we really wanted to outline and dive deeper into the kind of key areas that emerged from what we heard from members. Essentially, the 5 buckets of concern or uncertainty that came out of that feedback. The first one was around the complexity and the cost of the hubs model, and just to note that the most of the questions and the comments from members were not necessarily around the governance design itself or those transition recommendations that Mo talked us through earlier. They had to do with the wider model of the Network of Networks and the the model of hubs that we envisioned in Start Evolves. And so don't be surprised if some of these questions are a bit broader than what you would expect, and not necessarily not always overlapping with the content in the governance design or the membership transition. But yeah, one of the key areas that came out was around the complexity and the cost of the hubs model. So there was a real concern that, does this increase transaction costs? Does this increase costs for especially INGOs, for example, that have to potentially be members in multiple hubs? Does it make things more complex? Does it make communication and coordination more complex if you suddenly have all of these different poles and hubs doing things independently? The second area was around, the value add of the hub. What have we learned in the last 18 months of the hub proof of concept phase of working with hubs around, what does it mean to be part of a hub? What is the benefit of hub membership for members and for other actors in the hub context? There was also another something that came up quite a bit was around the local partners' ability to invest and engage in the hub model. So this is linked to the first issue around the complexity and cost. If we increase transaction costs and we expect local organizations to, engage and influence and participate directly in the hub, would that be possible for them given the kind of high number of, the high level really of resources in terms of time and money that may be required? And then there were a couple of questions around the Start Fund mechanism and what this transition means for the Start Fund. Does the mechanism itself change when the hubs become a part of the network more formally? And also a question around the platform and the service provider element that we talked about earlier. So the Start Network Secretariat transitioning to a service provider and not a delivery of programs. What does that mean? What are those services that the platform would provide? So these were the 5 key, not to say that there weren't other questions, but these were the 5 areas that we wanted to focus on today and try to address them in some way for you today before the decision tomorrow at the AGM. And just to say that a lot of them are not necessarily answered, but I believe they are sufficiently addressed through this Q&A document that I mentioned. So the first question around the complexity and the costs, there is a financial modeling exercise, which we know we need to do. So there's a lot of questions that we don't know. There's a lot of questions around, how sustainable is this model? What does this mean for membership contributions, for example, which are now currently being paid in one place at the global level? Are hubs sustainable, and what do their membership fees look like? So there's an element there that we need to explore further. There's definitely a financial modeling exercise that we need to continue to be doing in the coming months. And this, we hope, will inform our view of the sustainability of the whole model and ensure that it's affordable for INGOs, for example, paying membership fees in multiple hubs, and also ensure that hubs are able to sustain themselves at the same time or sustain aspects of their operations. And in the financial modeling exercise, we hope that members and hubs will also participate, and obviously hubs will have to be a crucial part of this and co-designing and co-developing this financial model. But yeah, we hope this will be an inclusive exercise and something where all of the views of our various stakeholders will be considered, and also ensuring that INGOs and their various family arrangements are taken into account. In terms of the second area of questions around the value add of the hub, And a lot of members asked, okay, so if you expect our country offices, if our country offices should join hubs, what do they get from that's different from the other coordination mechanisms that exist in the countries where they are based? What is essentially the added value of the hub model in that country? So what we wanted to say is, obviously, we are not assuming that all members will align with their hub or will find value in that hub. And this is exactly why joining it should be an active choice rather than a default. And this speaks to Mo's point earlier around, it's not an automatic opt-in just because a member of the START network is a member currently, that they will also be a member automatically of that hub. We think for exactly that reason, it should be a choice. But we also think that there are two main reasons why there is value in becoming a hub member. So firstly, you get to test and demonstrate the value of working differently and working in this completely different, more devolved and more locally led way of working, and not just considering the benefits of it in theory, but actively testing it and being that change. And the second reason is really, you're not just joining a hub, you're not just joining one mechanism in one country, you're benefiting from the global family of hubs, which we've really seen in the last few months during the proof of concept has become a real kind of family and a real collective of hubs, which transcends the national boundaries of the hubs, and enables kind of just a very a very new and different way of working across borders, in pursuit of shared objectives, in pursuit of shared advocacy, sharing learning. So yeah, we think those are two really, really important things to consider when you're thinking about the value out of the hub model. There's also, as I mentioned, the concerns around a local partner's ability to invest and engage in the hub, given the increased transaction costs, given the fact that a lot of local organizations are currently working through INGO members, which essentially take on a lot of the administrative burden of, due diligence, for example, or other compliance, mostly compliance issues that essentially are shielded from those through the INGOs. And there's a real concern that, when you introduce the hub model and you expect all of those organizations to devote time, to devote resources, to devote to really kind of energy into this. Is that realistic? Is that practicable for them? Is that going to actually constrict their ability to engage with the network in the way that they have to date? And obviously we recognize that devolving power in this way may increase transaction costs for local organizations. However, we believe that the solution to this is to invest in those organizations through appropriate resourcing and support, and not necessarily to continue the model of subgranting and working through INGOs, and indirectly receiving funding. And then the last two questions, or the last two areas of concern or uncertainty that emerged, like I said, the first one was around, what does this mean for the START Fund and the way that the mechanism works? What is the role of hubs in the START Fund process? Is there a role for the hubs in the process? And this is another question we haven't yet fully resolved. We have envisioned that there may be some changes to account for the role of hubs, but we are actually exploring this very topic in this assembly. There's a build session this week on Wednesday. It's at 2 p.m. GMT, and I would encourage all of you that are interested in this area of transition to join it. because this is exactly the issue that we're going to explore together with our members and our hubs. And then the last question, which was again uncertainty around the platform and what services is it going to provide, and what is its new role in the network. This is again something that we haven't answered fully. We've obviously given it a lot of thought over the past few years since Start Evolves in 2017, but also more recently we've thought about the different areas of support, the different functions or the different services that would be useful to hubs, and would be that you know they would find value in aggregating through a global service provider or platform, as we call it. But again, this is not something that we can provide an answer to yet, because we are still co-designing this with the hubs. And there is more work to be done in the coming few months. And again, this is because this is such a current and important issue, we are also discussing it in this assembly. And I just wanted to flag, there's a learn session today at 2:30, and then there's also a build session on Thursday at 1 p.m. GMT. And they are both focusing on that very topic and that very question. So just to give space for a few more questions, I know some of you have submitted a few through the chat. I will just stop sharing and maybe we can take a few questions. So there's a question for new members, what will be the process to join local hubs for membership? And then there's another question around membership, whether the hub members will also be the member of Start Global, or do they have to separately apply for global membership? I can take those two, unless Mo, you want to do that. But I'm happy to quickly respond to the first question around what is the process for new members joining hubs. This is up to the hub. So each individual hub will have its own membership criteria and membership process for selecting new members. So the process will be for new organizations will be totally up to them. There will be a few shared kind of standards across the hubs in the global network, but in terms of the process itself, I would envision it being quite straightforward, kind of similar to any other membership process, really, where there's an application phase and a selection, and then the due diligence phase. But the specifics and the criteria would be defined by each hub. And then in terms of the second question, which is, I think, if a hub member also wants to be a global member, we're moving away from global membership, like Mo mentioned earlier. So the idea is that we move to a model where there's only hubs and membership is only possible through individual hubs. So the idea is that over time, global membership will be phased out, and every member that is currently a member of START will join a hub in its location or in its region. And then if existing members do not automatically become hub members, then who will be the hub members that will set criteria?
Just to say, just to say for that last question, I think we actually put something in the membership transition paper as well. So kind of in helping to set up those criterias, hubs will be kind of consulting with kind of START members in country as well. So it's kind of a case of, you know, if you're not necessarily part of the hub, that you'll be kind of excluded from kind of helping to devise what that criteria might look like, because we, you know, obviously want to kind of make sure that it's encompassing and incorporating the concerns, the ideas of kind of wide gamut of members.
Great, thanks, Mo. I'm just reading through the other questions that we've got. There's quite a few. I need to catch up with them in my brain.
Sorry, there was one. We might just skip a couple because there was one I think from Josie from Cafford who just wanted to get a better understanding of what family membership, what we mean by family membership. So just, I think we should answer that first, just in case it has an impact on answering some of the other questions. So yeah, I mean, fundamentally, that's when we talk about family membership, we there's almost kind of two versions. So kind of, you know, the kind of conventional version is, you know, with a lot of our INGO members. And when we talk about family membership, we're talking very much about their kind of country or kind of local partner offices. So obviously, if we have an INGO that currently becomes a member of the START network by virtue of you know, the HQ or the UK office kind of signing, all of their organizations, their country offices, also are automatically members and have access to START funds and START resources and START programs. But there's also the kind of other family membership when it comes to the kind of Caritas family. That is a kind of obviously slightly different setup from our other organizations. So currently the kind of Caritas group of families are also kind of treated as a family kind of organization, particularly in relation to voting at the kind of AGM. So those are the kind of two distinctions currently when we talk about kind of family membership.
Thanks, Mo. I've picked up on a couple of other questions, and yeah, there seems to be most of them around membership and the transition of our current members. There's a question on what happens in a hub country in terms of so will all current members of the global START network that are present in the hub country have the option to join the hub? If I understand correctly, once the transition to hubs is completed, it would otherwise no longer be possible to, for example, access START funds in that country. So that's correct. The option to join a hub will be open to all of the START network members that are currently based in the hub country. But once the transition is over, so once the hub is established, once the members all transition, or all the members that want to transition to hub membership, any members that remain outside of the hub, even if they're currently members of START and can currently access the START fund, for example, that will no longer be the case. So that's correct. And then there was another interesting question. Sorry, there's a lot, and I'm worried that we're not going to be able to get through all of them in this session, but we will definitely follow up in writing.
Yeah.
Can non-members be included in the local hub to learn so that they can respond to the crisis more professionally on their own? Non-members can also share their own experiences as part of governance of the hub. So I think in the conversations we've had around membership transition with hubs and members, I think there's been an understanding that any organization that stays outside of the hub, even if they're not a member, they can still engage with the hub in various ways. So they can still kind of be. I think some of the hubs have even talked about associate membership or observer status of an organization. That's not necessarily a member, but there's still a connection there where learning can be shared and connections can be made. But when we talk about membership in kind of the strictest sense, which means accessing funding directly from the hub, participating in the hub's decision making and voting, designing programs, designing strategy at the hub level, then those things would not be available for organizations that are not part of the hub.
There is a question here about how does a hub get started in a country? Is this upon local initiative because there's a local interest? Does START currently actively encourage hub establishment in places, or will you do so at some point? What I'll say to this, so the kind of hub development kind of processes is led by our network development team. And there's a lot of information about this. Actually, if you look at one of the Learn Corners, our network of Learn Corner, where both you'll be able to kind of find a bit more some more resources around this, but also connect with members of our network development team who will be able to kind of explore this more with you.
Great. And then we can take a couple more, which were around hub development. What if there is no hub in a specific country? And is there a roadmap on when each hub will be established? So I can take the first one. What if there's no hub in a specific country? Then the organizations, so during the kind of interim phase that Mo described earlier, so before we reach the kind of completely decentralized network of networks model, things will remain the same for members that are based in countries without a hub presence. So if there isn't a hub in a country, then that member will continue to access the network as they have to date, potentially through their HQ, or if they're a national organization in a non-hub country, then they're still a member of START Network at the global level. In the future, when we envision that there will be hubs, membership will only be possible through hubs, we believe that obviously it's not going to be possible to have a hub in each and every country in the world or in each and every region in the world, but we have thought about ways in which we could accommodate members in countries without hubs. Some of the things that we've talked about is having like a catch-all hub, which accommodates those members regardless of where they're based if they don't have a hub in their location. We've thought about potentially having more kind of broader regional hubs that also encompass organizations that are in that region but without a hub. But this is very much this is a very good question, because it's also something that we still need to figure out exactly how it's going to work. But the thing is that we almost like don't have to worry about it too much until the kind of we reach the end state, which is in a few years' time. And we've given ourselves a bit more time to figure that out. And also, is there a roadmap on when each hub will be established? I don't know. Do we want to talk about transition, Mo, just really quick? The kind of 2022 transition of the current hubs. So yeah, do you want to take that one?
Yeah. So as many of you know, we've got our kind of current 5 founding hubs, who of which we've been kind of helping to support and incubate over the last 18 months or so. And really the kind of roadmap for at least that original cohort is that they will become fully kind of independent entities by the end of 2022, so kind of over the course of the next year. And then obviously during that time, they'll also be obviously bringing in new members within their respective hubs. Our network development team have also kind of started the process with another kind of new cohort of hubs, using the lessons that we've kind of acquired with the kind of first cohort. So, it's hard to kind of say at the moment, it takes X amount of time for, a specific hub to kind of mature to being an independent entity, because obviously there are numerous different kind of factors that will influence the time that might be happening. But as I kind of mentioned earlier as well, there's a bit of information about this kind of in the Learn Corner, and some of the lessons learned and some of the kind of projected timeframes as well. And so please feel free to reach out to members of our network development team, who you'll find kind of on the booth, if you've kind of got any further questions in relation to this as well.
Thanks, Mo. And with only a couple of minutes to go, I think it's also, sorry, I missed that question, but I think it's quite important to address. It's the one around due diligence. And someone is asking, would due diligence, would organizations and INGOs that have passed due diligence at the global level be eligible to join the hub automatically? and also our local members joining through a different sort of due diligence process. And what I just wanted to clarify is that we expect all members, regardless of whether they are INGOs or local or national, to go through the same due diligence framework. So the hubs would obviously have their own membership process, but the due diligence framework that they would use for their members would be kind of a standard across the network. That's the ideal. But then in terms of your question, if members, especially INGOs who are cleared in international due diligence process, would be eligible to join the hub based on that due diligence, that depends on the degree in which the country office of that INGO is independent from its HQ. So if all of their policies are the same in the family, then the due diligence would apply. But if the INGO kind of country office is more independent and has its own policies and processes and is quite different from the HQ, then we would expect that they would still go through due diligence, even if their HQ has been due diligenced at the global level. But I hope that was clear, but I can see that we've got 1 minute left. But thank you. Thanks, Noreen and Mo and Vincent. And really sorry we didn't get to all of the questions. There's so many of them, but we will definitely follow up. And as Mo said, you can check out the Network of Networks Learn Corner on the platform. All of that information hopefully should be there as well. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.